No one speaks of the grace here. It's forbidden. We're told we have the power to lure grown men from their beds, make boys lose their minds, and drive the wives mad with jealousy. They believe our very skin emits a powerful aphrodisiac, the potent essence of youth, of a girl on the edge of womanhood. That's why we're banished for our 16th year, to release our magic into the wild before we're allowed to return to civilization. But I don't feel powerful. I don't feel magical. Speaking of the grace here is forbidden, but it hasn't stopped me from searching for clues. A slip of the tongue between lovers in the meadow, a frightening bedtime story that doesn't feel like a story at all. Knowing glances nestled in the frosty hollows between pleasantries of the women at the market, but they give away nothing. The truth about the grace year, what happens during that shadow year, is hidden away in the tiny slivers of filament hovering around them when they think no one's watching. But I'm always watching. The slip of a shawl, scarred shoulders bared under a harvest moon, haunted fingertips skimming the pond, watching the ripples fade to black, their eyes a million miles away, in wonderment, in horror. I used to think that was my magic, having the power to see things others couldn't, things they didn't even want to admit to themselves. But all you have to do is open your eyes. My eyes are wide open. Autumn. I follow her through the woods, a well-worn path I've seen 1,000 times. Ferns, lady slipper, and thistle, the mysterious red flowers dotting the path. 5 petals, perfectly formed like they were made just for us. 1 petal for the grace year girls, 1 petal for the wives, 1 for the laborers, 1 for the women of the outskirts, and 1 for her. The girl looks back at me over her shoulder, giving me that confident grin. She reminds me of someone, but I can't place the name or the face. Maybe something from a long-forgotten memory, a past life. Perhaps a younger sister I never knew. Heart-shaped face, a small red strawberry mark under her right eye. Delicate features like mine, but there's nothing delicate about this girl. There's a fierceness in her steel gray eyes. Her dark hair is shorn close to her scalp. A punishment or a rebellion, I cannot say. I don't know her, but strangely enough, I know that I love her. It's not a love like my father has for my mother. It's protective and pure, the same way I felt about those robins I cared for last winter. We reach the clearing where women from all walks of life have gathered, the tiny red flower pinned above their hearts. There's no bickering or murderous glares. Everyone has come together in peace, in unity. We are sisters, daughters, mothers, grandmothers, standing together for a common need, greater than ourselves. We are the weaker sex, weaker no more, the girl says. The women answer with a primal roar. But I'm not afraid. I only feel a sense of pride. The girl is the one. She's the one who will change everything. And somehow I'm a part of all this. This path has been paved with blood, the blood of our own. But it was not in vain. Tonight, the grace year comes to an end. As I expel the air from my lungs, I find myself not in the woods, not with the girl, but here, in this stifling room, in my bed, my sisters glaring down at me. "What did she say?" my older sister Ivy asks, her cheeks ablaze. "Nothing," June replies, squeezing Ivy's wrist. "We heard nothing." As my mother enters the room, my little sisters Clara and Penny poke me out of bed. I look to June to thank her for quelling the situation, but she won't meet my gaze. She won't, or she can't. I'm not sure what's worse. We're not allowed to dream. The men believe it's a way we can hide our magic. Having the dreams would be enough to get me punished. But if anyone ever found out what the dreams were about, it would mean the gallows. My sisters lead me to the sewing room, fluttering around me like a knot of bickering sparrows, pushing, pulling. "Ease up," I gasp, as Clara and Penny yank on the corset strings with a little too much glee. They think this is all fun and games. They don't realize that in a few short years, it will be their turn. I swat at them. "Don't you have anyone else to torture?" "Stop your fussing," my mother says, taking out her frustration on my scalp as she finishes my braid. "Your father has let you get away with murder all these years, with your mud-stained frocks, dirt under your nails. For once, you're going to know what it feels like to be a lady." "Why bother?" Ivy flaunts her growing belly in the looking glass for all of us to see. "No one in their right mind would give a veil to tyranny." "So be it," my mother says as she grabs the corset strings and pulls even tighter. "But she owes me this." I was a willful child, too curious for my own good, head in the clouds, lacking propriety, among other things. And I will be the first girl in our family to go into her grace year without receiving a veil. My mother doesn't need to say it. Every time she looks at me, I feel her resentment, her quiet rage. Here it is. My oldest sister June slips back into the room, carrying a deep blue raw silk dress with river clam pearls adorning the shawl neckline. It's the same dress she wore on her veiling day 4 years ago. It smells of lilac and fear. White lilac was the flower her suitor chose for her, the symbol of early love, innocence. It's kind of her to let me borrow it, but that's June. Not even the grace year could take that away from her. All the other girls in my year will be wearing new dresses today with frills and embroidery, the latest style. But my parents knew better than to waste their resources on me. I have no prospects. I made damn sure of that. There are 12 eligible boys in Garner County this year. Boys born into families that have standing and position. And there are 33 girls. Today, we're expected to parade around town, giving the boys one last viewing before they join the men in the main barn to trade and barter our fates like cattle. Which isn't that far off, considering we're branded at birth on the bottom of our foot with our father's sigil. When all the claims have been made, our fathers will deliver the veils to the awaiting girls at the church, silently placing the gauzy monstrosities on the chosen ones' heads. And tomorrow morning, when we're all lined up in the square to leave for our grace year, each boy will lift the veil of the girl of his choosing as a promise of marriage, while the rest of us will be completely dispensable. "I knew you had a figure under there." My mother purses her lips, causing the fine lines around her mouth to settle into deep grooves. She'd stop doing it if she knew how old it made her look. The only thing worse than being old in Garner County is being barren. For the life of me, I'll never understand why you squandered your beauty, squandered your chance to run your own house, she says as she eases the dress over my head. My arm gets stuck and I start pulling. Stop fighting, or it's going to... The sound of ripping fabric causes a visible heat to creep up my mother's neck, settling into her jaw. Needle and thread, she barks at my sisters, and they hop too. I try to hold it in, but the harder I try, the worse it gets until I burst out laughing. I can't even put on a dress right. Go ahead, laugh all you want, but you won't think it's so funny when no one gives you a veil and you come back from the gracier only to be sent straight to one of the labor houses, working your fingers to the bone. Better than being someone's wife, I mutter. Never say that. She grabs my face in her hands, and my sisters scatter. Do you want them to think you're a usurper, to be cast out? The poachers would love to get their hands on you. She lowers her voice. You cannot bring shame to this family. What's this about? My father tucks his pipe into his breast pocket as he makes a rare appearance in the sewing room. Mother quickly composes herself and mends the tear. No shame in hard work, he says as he ducks under the eave, kissing my mother on the cheek, reeking of iodine and sweet tobacco. She can work in the dairy or the mill when she returns. That's entirely respectable. You know our tyranny's always been a free spirit, he says, with a conspiratorial wink. I look away, pretending to be fascinated by the dots of hazy light seeping in through the eyelet curtains. My father and I used to be thick as winter wool. People said he had a certain twinkle in his eye when he spoke of me. With 5 daughters, I guess I was the closest thing to a coveted son he'd ever get. On the sly, he taught me how to fish, how to handle a knife, how to take care of myself. But everything's different now. I can't look at him the same way after the night I caught him at the apothecary, doing the unspeakable. Clearly, he's still trying for a prized son. But I always thought he was better than that. As it turns out, he's just like the rest of them. Look at you, my father says, in an attempt to draw my attention. Maybe you'll get a veil after all. I keep my mouth clamped shut, but inside, I want to scream. Being married off isn't a privilege to me. There's no freedom and comfort. They're padded shackles, to be sure, but shackles nonetheless. At least in the labor house, my life will still belong to me. My body will belong to me. But those kind of thoughts get me in trouble, even when I don't say them out loud. When I was small, every thought showed on my face. I've learned to hide behind a pleasant smile, but sometimes when I catch my reflection in the glass, I see the intensity burning in my eyes. The closer I get to my gracier, the hotter the fire burns. Sometimes I feel like my eyes are going to sear right out of my skull. As my mother reaches for the red silk to tie off my braid, I feel a twinge of panic. This is it, the moment I'll be marked with the color of warning, of sin. All the women in Garner County have to wear their hair the same way, pulled back from the face, plaited down the back. In doing so, the men believe the women won't be able to hide anything from them. A snide expression, a wandering eye, or a flash of magic. White ribbons for the young girls, red for the Gracier girls, and black for the wives. Innocence, blood, death. Perfect, my mother says as she puts the final touches on the bow. Even though I can't see the red strand, I feel the weight of it, and everything it implies, like an anchor holding me to this world. Can I go now, I ask, as I pull away from her fidgeting hands. Without an escort? I don't need an escort, I say as I cram my sturdy feet into the fine black leather slippers. I can handle myself. And what of the fur trappers from the territory? Can you handle them as well? That was one girl, and it was ages ago. I let out a sigh. I remember it like it was yesterday. Anna Berglund, my mother says, her eyes glazing over. It was our veiling day. She was walking through town and he just snatched her up, flung her over his horse, and took off into the wilderness, never to be heard from again. It's odd. What I remember most about that story is that even though she was screaming and crying all through town, the men declared she didn't fight hard enough and punished her younger sister in her stead by casting her to the outskirts for a life of prostitution. That's the part of the story no one ever speaks of. Let her go, it's her last day, my father pleads, pretending to give my mother the final say. She's accustomed to being on her own. Besides, I'd like to spend the day with my beautiful wife, just the two of us. For all intents and purposes, they appear to be in love. The past few years, my father has spent more and more time in the outskirts, but it's given me a fair amount of freedom, and for that, I should be grateful. My mother smiles up at him. I suppose it'll be all right, as long as Tyranny's not planning on skulking off into the woods to meet Michael Welk. I try to play it off, but my throat goes bone dry. I had no idea she knew about that. She tugs down on the bodice of my dress, trying to get it to sit right. Tomorrow, when he lifts Kirsten Jenkins's veil, you're going to realize how foolish you've been. That's not why. We're just friends, I sputter. A hint of a smile slips into the corner of her mouth. Well, since you're so eager to be out and about, you can fetch some berries for the gathering tonight. She knows I hate going to the market, especially on Veiling Day when all of Garner County will be out on full display. But I think that's the whole point. She's going to make the most out of this. As she takes off her thimble to fetch a coin from her deerskin pouch, I catch a glimpse of the missing tip of her thumb. She's never said as much, but I know it's a memento from her Gracier. She catches my gaze and shoves the thimble back on. Forgive me, I say, as I look down at the worn wood grain beneath my feet. I'll get the berries. I'd agree to anything to get out of this room. As if sensing my desperation, Father gives a slight nod toward the door, and I take off like a shot. Don't stray from town, my mother calls after me. Dodging stacks of books, stockings drying on the banister, my father's medicine bag, and a basket full of unfinished knitting, I rush down the 3 flights of stairs past the disapproving clucks of the maids, bursting out of our row house into the open air. But the sharp autumn breeze feels alien against my bare skin. My neck, my collarbone, my chest, my calves, the bottom half of my knees. It's just a little skin, I tell myself. Nothing they haven't seen before. But I feel exposed. Vulnerable. A girl from my year, Gertrude Fenton, passes with her mother. I can't help but look at her hands. They're covered in dainty white gloves. It almost makes me forget about what happened to her. Almost. Despite her misfortune, Even Gertie seems to be still hoping for a veil, to run a house of her own, to be blessed with sons. I wish I wanted those things. I wish it were that simple. Happy Veiling Day! Mrs. Barton regards me as she clings to her husband's arm a little tighter. Who's that? Mr. Barton asks. The James girl, she replies through gritted teeth. The middle one. His gaze rakes over my skin. I see her magic had finally come in. Or she's been hiding it. Her eyes narrow on me with the focus of a vulture pecking away at a carcass. All I want to do is cover up, but I'm not going back inside that house. I have to remind myself. The dresses, the red ribbons, the veils, the ceremonies, they're all just distractions to keep our minds off the real issue at hand. The grace year. My chin begins to quiver when I think of the year ahead. The unknown. But I plaster on a vacant smile, as if I'm happy to play my part, so I might return and marry and breed and die. But not all of us will make it home. Not in one piece. Trying to get a hold of my nerves, I walk the square where all the girls of my year will be lined up tomorrow. It doesn't take magic or even a keen eye to see that during the grace year, something profound happens. We'd see them when they left for the encampment each year. Though some were veiled, their hands told me everything I needed to know. Cuticles, picked raw with worry, nervous impulses flickering through cold fingertips. But they were full of promise, alive. And when they returned, the ones who returned, they were emaciated, weary, broken. The younger children made a game out of it, taking bets on who would make it back. But the closer I got to my own grace year, the less amusing it became. Happy Veiling Day! Mr. Fallow tips his hat in a gentlemanly fashion, but his eyes linger on my skin, on the red ribbon trailing down my backside. A little too long for comfort. Geezer Fallow is what they call him behind his back, because no one knows exactly how old he is, but he's clearly not too old to give me the once-over. They call us the weaker sex. It's pounded into us every Sunday in church, how everything's Eve's fault for not expelling her magic when she had the chance. But I still can't understand why the girls don't get a say. Sure, there are secret arrangements, whispers in the dark, but why must the boys get to decide everything? As far as I can tell, we all have hearts. We all have brains. There are only a few differences I can see, and most men seem to think with that part anyway. It's funny to me that they think claiming us, lifting our veils, will give us something to live for during our grace year. If I knew I had to come home and lie with someone like Tommy Pearson, I might walk straight into the poacher's blade with open arms. A blackbird lands on the branch of the punishment tree in the center of the square. The scratching of its claws against the dull metal limb sends a sliver of ice through my blood. Apparently, it used to be a real tree, but when they burned Eve alive for heresy, the tree went with her. So they built this one out of steel, an everlasting emblem of our sin. A group of men pass by, shrouded in whispers. There have been rumors circulating for months, whispers of a usurper. Apparently, the guards have found evidence of secret gatherings in the woods, men's clothes hanging from branches like an effigy. At first they thought it might be a trapper trying to stir up trouble, or a jilted woman from the outskirts trying to get even. But then, the suspicion spread to the county. It's hard to imagine that it could be one of our own, but Garner County is full of secrets. Some that are as clear as fresh-cut glass, but they choose to ignore. I'll never understand that. I'd rather have the truth, no matter how painful the outcome. "For the love of God, stand up straight, tyranny," a woman scolds as she passes. Aunt Lenny. "And without an escort, my poor brother," she whispers to her daughters loud enough for me to hear every syllable. Like mother, like daughter. She holds a sprig of holly to her upturned nose. In the old language, it was the flower of protection. Her sleeve slips from her wrist, exposing a swath of pink puckered skin on her forearm. My sister Ivy said she saw it once when she went on a call with Father to treat her cough. A scar running all the way from her wrist to her shoulder blade. Aunt Lenny yanks down her sleeve to block my stare. She runs wild in the woods. Best place for her, really. How would she know what I've been up to unless she's been spying on me? Ever since my first bleed, I've gotten all kinds of unwanted advice, most of it asinine at best. But this is just plain mean. Aunt Lenny glares at me before dropping the sprig and continuing on her way. As I was saying, there's so much to consider when giving a veil. Is she pleasant? Compliant? Will she bear sons? Is she hardy enough to survive the grace year? I don't envy the men. It's a heavy day. Indeed. If only she knew. I stamped the holly into the ground. The women believed the men's veiling gathering in the barn to be a reverent affair. But there's nothing reverent about it. I know this because I've witnessed the last 6 years in a row by hiding in the loft behind the sacks of grain. All they do is drink ale, sling out vulgarities, and occasionally get into a brawl over one of the girls. But curiously, there's no talk of our dangerous magic. In fact, the only time magic comes up is when it's convenient for them, like when Mrs. Pinter's husband died. Mr. Coffey suddenly accused his wife of 25 years of secretly harboring her magic and levitating in her sleep. Mrs. Coffey was as meek and mild as they come, hardly the levitating sort. But she was cast out, no questions asked, and surprise, Mr. Coffey married Mrs. Pinter the following day. My, tyranny, Kirsten says as she approaches with a few of her followers trailing behind. Her veiling dress might be the prettiest one I've ever seen. Cream silk with strands of gold woven in, glinting in the sun, just like her hair. Kirsten reaches out, skimming her fingertips over the pearls near my collarbone, with a familiarity we don't share. That dress suits you better than it did in June, she says, looking up at me through her sugary lashes. But don't tell her I said that. The girls behind her stifle wicked giggles. My mother would probably be mortified to know they recognized it was a hand-me-down. But the girls of Garner County are always on the lookout for an opportunity to dole out a thinly shrouded insult. I try to laugh it off, but my undergarments are laced so tight I can't find the air. It doesn't matter anyway. The only reason Kirsten even acknowledges me is because of Michael. Michael Welk has been my closest friend since childhood. We used to spend all our time spying on people, trying to uncover clues about the grace year. But eventually, Michael grew tired of that game. Only, it wasn't a game to me. Most girls drift away from the boys around their 10th birthday, when the girls' schooling is over. But somehow, Michael and I managed to remain friends. Maybe it's because I wanted nothing from him and he wanted nothing from me. It was simple. Of course, we couldn't run around town like we used to, but we found a way. Kirsten probably thinks I have his ear, but I don't get involved in Michael's love life. Most nights we just lay in the clearing looking up at the stars, lost in our own worlds, and that seemed to be enough for both of us. Kirsten shushes the girls behind her. "I'll keep my fingers crossed you'll get a veil tonight, Tyranny," she says with a smile that registers on the back of my neck. I know that smile. It's the same one she gave Father Edmunds last Sunday when she noticed his hands were trembling as he placed the holy wafer on her awaiting pink tongue. Her magic came in early, and she knew it. Behind the carefully arranged face, the cleverly tailored clothes meant to accentuate her shape, she could be cruel. Once, I saw her drown a butterfly, all the while playing with its wings. Despite her mean streak, she's a fitting wife for the future leader of the council. She'll devote herself to Michael, dote on their sons, and breed cruel but beautiful daughters. I watch the girls as they flit down the lane in perfect formation, like a swarm of yellow jackets. I can't help wondering what they'll be like away from the county. What will happen to their fake smiles and coquetry? Will they run wild and roll in the mud and howl at the moon? I wonder if you can see the magic leave your body, if it's taken from you like a bolt of heat lightning, or seeps out of you like a slow-leaking poison. But there's another thought creeping into my consciousness. What if nothing happens at all? Digging my newly buffed nails into the fleshy part of my palms, I whisper, "The girl, the gathering, it's only a dream." I can't be tempted into that kind of thinking again. I can't afford to give in to childhood fancies, because even if the magic is a lie, the poachers are very real. Bastards born to the women of the outskirts, the reviled. It's common knowledge they're out there waiting for a chance to grab one of the girls during their grace here, when their magic is believed to be most potent, so they can sell their essence on the black market as an aphrodisiac and youth serum. I stare up at the massive wood gate separating us from the outskirts and wonder if they're already out there, waiting for us. The breeze rushes over my bare skin as if in response, and I move a little quicker. Folks from the county are gathered around the greenhouse, trying to guess which flower the suitors have chosen for which grace year girl. I'm happy to hear my name isn't on anyone's lips. When our families immigrated, there were so many different languages being spoken that flowers were the only common language, a way to tell someone, "I'm sorry, good luck, I trust you, I'm fond of you," or even, "I wish you ill." There's a flower for nearly every sentiment, but now that we all speak English, you'd think the demand would have faded. But here we are, clinging fast to the old ways. It makes me doubt anything will ever change, no matter what. "Which one are you hoping for, miss?" a worker asks, swiping the back of her calloused hand over her brow. "No, not for me," I say in an embarrassed hush. "Just seeing what's in bloom." I spot a small basket tucked under a bench, red petals peeking through the seams. "What are those?" I ask. "Just weeds," she says. "They used to be everywhere. Couldn't take a step out of your house without coming upon one. They got rid of them around here. But that's the funny thing about weeds. You can pull them up by the root, burn the soil where they stood, might lie dormant for years, but they'll always find a way." I'm leaning in for a closer look when she says, "Don't worry about it none if you don't get a veil, Tyranny." How do you know my name?" I stammer. She gives me a winsome smile. "Someday you'll get a flower. It might be a little withered around the edges, but it'll mean just the same. Love's not just for the marrieds, it's for everyone," she says as she slips a bloom into my hand. Flustered, I turn on my heel and make a beeline for the market. Uncurling my fingers, I find a deep purple iris, the petals and falls perfectly formed. "Hope," I whisper, my eyes welling up. I don't hope for a flower from a boy, but I hope for a better life, a truthful life. I'm not usually sentimental, but there's something about it that feels like a sign, like its own kind of magic. I'm tucking the bloom into my dress, over my heart for safekeeping, when I pass a line of guards, desperately trying to avert their eyes. Fur trappers, fresh from the territory, click their tongues as they pass. They're vulgar and unkempt, but somehow it seems more honest that way. I want to look in their eyes, see if I can sense their adventures, the vast northern wilderness in their weathered faces. But I needn't dare. All I have to do is buy the berries, and the sooner I get this over with, the sooner I can meet Michael. When I enter the covered market, an uncomfortable din permeates the air. Normally, I pass through the stalls unnoticed, slipping in and out of the strands of garlic and rashers of bacon like a phantom breeze. But today, the wives glare as I walk by, and the men smile in a way that makes me want to hide. "It's the James girl," a woman whispers. "The tomboy? I'd give her a veil and then some." A man elbows his young son. Heat rushes to my cheeks. I feel ashamed, and I don't even know why. I'm the same girl I was yesterday, but now that I'm freshly scrubbed and squeezed into this ridiculous dress, marked by a red ribbon, I've become entirely visible to the men and women of Garner County, like some exotic animal on display. Their eyes, their whispers feel like the sharp edge of a blade grazing my skin. But there's one set of eyes in particular that makes me move a little faster. Tommy Pearson. He seems to be following me. I don't need to see him to know he's there. I can hear the beating wings of his latest pet perched on his arm. He has a fondness for birds of prey. It sounds impressive, but there's no skill involved. He's not gaining their trust, their respect. He's just breaking them. Prying the coin from my sweaty palm, I drop it in the jar and grab the closest basket of berries I can find. I keep my head down as I maneuver through the crowd, their whispers buzzing in my ears. And just as I've nearly cleared the awning, I run smack into Father Edmonds, mulberries spilling all around me. He starts sputtering out something cross but stops when he looks at me. "My dear Miss James, you're in a hurry." "Is that really her?" Tommy Pearson calls out from behind me. "Tyranny the Terrible?" "I can still kick just as hard," I say, as I continue to gather the berries. "I'm counting on it," he replies, his pale eyes locking on mine. "I like them feisty." Looking up to thank Father Edmonds, I see his gaze is fixed on my bosom. "If you need anything at all, my child." As I reach for the basket, he strokes the side of my hand. "Your skin is so soft," he whispers. Abandoning the berries, I take off running. I hear laughter behind me, Father Edmund's heavy breathing, the eagle furiously beating its wings against its tether. Slipping behind an oak to catch my breath, I pull the iris from my dress, only to find it's been crushed by the corset. I clench the rowan bloom in my fist. That familiar heat rushes through me. Instead of dampening the urge, I breathe it in, coaxing it forward, because in this moment, oh, how I long to be full of dangerous magic.